Hello, and welcome back to Baby Elias's stories. We now return to The Fifth Elephant by Terry Pratchett, Part 6. Days rolled by. More accurately, they rattled by. It was a comfortable coach, as coaches went, and as coaches on this road went over continual potholes, it swayed and rocked like a cradle. Initially, the motion was soothing. After a day or two, it palled. So did the scenery. Vimes stared gloomily out of the window. There was another Clacks Tower on the horizon. They were putting them near the road, he recalled, even though that wasn't the direct route. Only a fool would build them across the Badlands. You had to remember, sometimes, that within a few 100 miles of Ankh-Morpork, there were still trolls who hadn't caught on to the fact that humans weren't digestible. Besides, most of the settlements were near the road. The new guild must be coining money. Even from here, he could see the scaffolding as workers feverishly attached still more gantries and paddles to the main tower. The whole thing would likely be matchsticks after the next hurricane. But by then, the owners would probably have earned enough to build another 5 or 50. It had all happened so fast. Who'd have believed it? But all the components had been there for years. Semaphore was ancient. A century ago, the watch had used a few towers to relay messages to patrolling officers. And gargoyles had nothing to do all day but sit and watch things, and usually were too unimaginative to make mistakes. What had happened was that people thought differently about news now. Once upon a time, they'd have used something like this to relay information. Once upon a time, they'd have used something like this to relay information about troop movements and the death of kings. True, those were things that people needed to know, but they didn't need to know them every day. No, what they needed to know every day were things like, how much are cattle selling for in Ankh-Morpork today? Because if they weren't fetching much, maybe it was better to drive them to Quirm instead. People needed to know these little things. Lots and lots of little things. Little things like, did my ship get there safely? That's why the guild was driving hell-bent across the mountains onto Genua, 4,000 miles away. It took many months for a ship to round Cape Terror. How much exactly would a trader pay to know within a day when it had arrived? And how much the cargo was worth? Had it been sold? Was there credit to the trader's name in Ankh-Morpork? Coining money? Oh, yes. And it had caught on as fast as every other craze did in the big city. It seemed as though everybody who could put together a pole, a couple of gargoyles, and some second-hand windmill machinery was in on the business. You couldn't go out to dinner these days without seeing people nip out of the restaurant every 5 minutes to check that there wasn't any messages for them on the nearest pole. As for those who cut out the middleman and signaled directly to their friends across a crowded room, causing mild contusions to those nearby. Vimes shook his head. That was messages without meaning, telepathy without brains. But it had been good, hadn't it, last week? When don't know Jack had pinched that silver in Stow-Lat, and then galloped at speed to the sanctuary of the Shades in Ankh-Morpork? And Sergeant Edge of the Stow-Lat Watch, who trained under Vimes, had put a message on the clacks which arrived on Vimes's desk more than an hour before Jack sauntered through the city gates and into the waiting embrace of Sergeant Detritus. Legally, it had been a bit tricky, since the offence hadn't been committed on Ankh-Morpork soil, and a semaphore message did not, strictly speaking, come under the heading of hot pursuit. But Jack had kindly solved that one by taking a wild swing at the troll, resulting in his arrest for assault on a watch officer and treatment for a broken wrist. There was a gentle snore from Lady Sybil. A marriage is always made up of two people who are prepared to swear that only the other one snores. Inigo Skimmer was hunched in a corner, reading a book. Vimes watched him for some time. "I'm just going up top for some air," he said at last, opening the door. The clattering of the wheels filled the tiny hot space, and dust blew in. "Your Grace," Inigo began, standing up. Vimes, already clambering up the side of the coach, stuck his head back in. "You're not making any friends with that attitude," he said, and kicked the door shut with his foot. "Fuck." Sherry and Detritus had made themselves comfortable on the roof. It was a lot less stuffy, and at least there was a view, if vegetables were your idea of a panorama. Vimes worked himself into a niche between two bundles and leaned toward Sherry. "You know about the clacks, right?" he said. "Well, sort of, sir." "Good." Vimes passed her a piece of paper. "There's bound to be a tower near where we stop tonight. Cipher this and send it to the watch, will you? They ought to be able to turn it around in an hour, if they ask the right people. Tell them to try Washable Topsy. She does the laundry there. Or Gilbert. He always seems to know what's going on." Sherry read the message and then stared at Vimes. "Are you sure, sir?" she said. "Maybe. Make sure you send the description. Names don't mean much." "May I ask what makes you think?" "His walk. And he didn't catch an orange," said Vimes. Constable Visit was cleaning out the old pigeon loft when the message arrived on the clacks. He was spending more and more time with the pigeons these days. It wasn't a popular job, so no one had tried to take it away from him. And at least up here, the shouts and door slammings were muffled. The perches gleamed. Constable Visit enjoyed his job. He didn't have many friends in the city. Truth to tell, he didn't have many friends in the watch either. But at least there were people to talk to, and he was making headway with the religious instructions of the pigeons. But now there was this. It was addressed to Captain Carrot. That meant it probably ought to be delivered to Captain Cullen now, and personally, because Captain Cullen thought that people were spying on his messages sent via the suction tube. Constable Visit had been fairly safe until now. Omnians were good at not questioning orders, even ones that made no sense. Visit instinctively respected authority, no matter how crazy, because he'd been brought up properly, and he had plenty of time to keep his armor bright. Brightly polished armor had suddenly become very important in the watch for some reason. Even so, going into Colin's office needed all the courage that the legendary Bishop Horn had shown when entering the city of the Oolites, and everyone knew what they did to strangers. Visit climbed down from the loft and made his nervous way to the main building, taking care to walk smartly. The main office was more or less empty. There seemed to be fewer watchmen around these days. Usually people preferred to loaf indoors in this chilly weather, but suddenly everyone was keen to be out of Captain Colin's view. Visit went up to the office and knocked on the door. He knocked again. When there was no reply, he pushed open the door, walked carefully over to the sparkling clean desk, and went to tuck the message, flimsy, under the ink bottle in case it blew away. Aha! The ink soared up as Visit's hand jerked. He had a vision of the blue-black shower passing his eye and heard the splat as it hit something behind him. He turned like an automaton to see a Captain Colin who had been white-faced if it wasn't for the ink. I see, said Colin. Assault on a superior officer, eh? It was an accident, Captain. Oh, was it? And why, pray, were you sneaking into my office? I didn't think you were in here, Captain, Visit gabbled. Aha! Sorry? Sneaking a look at my private papers, eh? No, Captain. Visit rallied a little bit. Why were you standing behind the door, Captain? Oh, I'm not allowed to stand behind my own door, is that it? It was then that Constable Visit made his next mistake. He tried to smile. Well, it is a bit odd, sir. Are you suggesting there is anything odd about me, Constable? Said Captain Colin. Is there anything about me that you finds funny? Visit stared at the mottled face, speckled with ink. Not a thing, sir. You've been working acceptably, Constable, said Colin, standing slightly too close to Visit, and therefore I don't intend to be harsh with you. No one could call me an unfair man. You is demoted to Lance Constable. Understand? Your pay will be adjusted and backdated to the beginning of the month. Visit saluted. It was probably the only way to get out of there alive. One of Colin's eyes was twitching. However, you could redeem yourself, said Colin, if you was to tell me who has been stealing. I said stealing the sugar lumps. Sir? I knows there was 43 last night. I counted him very thoroughly. There's 41 this morning, Constable. And they're locked in the desk. Can you explain that? If Visit had been suicidal and honest, he would have said, Well, Captain, while of course I think you have many worthy qualities, I have known you count your fingers twice and come up with different answers. Mice? He said weakly. Ha! Off you go, Lance Constable, and just you think about what I said. When the dejected Visit had gone, Captain Cullen sat down at his big, clean desk. The little flickering part of his brain that was still sparking coherent thought through the fog of mind-numbing terror that filled Cullen's head was telling him that he was so far out of his depth that the fish had lights on their noses. Yes, he did have a clean desk, but that was because he was throwing all the paperwork away. It wasn't that he was illiterate, but Fred Cullen did need a bit of a think and a run-up to tackle anything much longer than a list, and he intended to get lost in any word that had more than 3 syllables. He was, in fact, functionally literate. That is, he thought of reading and writing like he thought about boots. You needed them, but they weren't supposed to be fun, and you got suspicious about people who got a kick out of them. Of course, Mr. Vimes had kept his desk piled high with paperwork, but it occurred to Cullen that maybe Vimes and Carrot, between them, had developed a way of keeping just ahead of the piles, by knowing what was important and what wasn't. To Cullen, it was all gut-wrenchingly mysterious. There were complaints and memos and invitations and letters requesting a few minutes of your time and forms to fill in and reports to read and sentences containing words like iniquitous and immediate action, and they tottered in his mind like a great big wave poised to fall on him. The sane core of Cullen was wondering if the purpose of officers wasn't to stand between the sergeants and all this slush, so that they could get on with sergeanting. Captain Cullen took a deep breath. Wobbly breath. On the other hand, if people were nicking the sugar lumps, no wonder things weren't working properly. Get the sugar lumps right, and everything else would work out. That made sense. He turned, and his eye caught the huge accusing heap of paperwork in the corner. And the empty fireplace, too. That was what officering was all about, wasn't it? Making decisions. Lance Constable Visit walked dejectedly back down to the main office, which had filled up for a watch change. Everyone was clustered around one of the desks on which lay, looking slightly muddy, the scone of stone. Constable Thighbiter found it in Zephyr Street, just lying there, said Sergeant Strong in the Arm. The thief must have got scared. A long way from the museum, though, said Red Shoe. Why lug it all the way across the city and leave it in a posh part of town where someone's bound to trip over it? Oh, woe is me, for I am undone, said Constable Visit, who felt he was playing a poor second fiddle to what he would call, if he had no use for his legs, a pagan image. Could be draughty, said Corporal Nobbs, a man of little sympathy. I mean, I have been reduced to Lance Constable, said Visit. What? Why? Said Sergeant Strong on the Arm. I'm not sure, said Visit. That just about does it, said the dwarf. He sacked 3 of the officers up at Dolly Sisters yesterday. Well, I'm not waiting for it to happen to me, so I'm off to Stolat. They're always looking for trained watchmen. I'm a sergeant. I could name my price. But, look, Vimesy used to say that sort of thing too. I heard him, said Nobby.
Yeah, but that was different.
How?
That was Mr. Vimes,
said Strong on the Arm.
Remember that riot in Easy Street last year? Bloke came after me with a club when I was on the ground, and Mr. Vimes caught it on his arm and punched the man right in the head.
Yeah, said Constable Hackney, another dwarf. When your back's against the wall, Mr. Vimes is right behind you. But old Fred, you all know old Fred Cullen, boys, Nobby wheedled, taking a kettle off the office stove and pouring the boiling water into a teapot. He knows coppering inside and out. He's kind of coppering, yeah? Said Hackney. I mean, he's been a copper longer than anyone in the watch, said Nobby. One of the dwarves said something in dwarfish. There were a few smiles from the shorter watchman. What was that? Said Nobby.
Well, roughly translated, said Strong on the Arm. My bomb has been a bomb for a very long time, but I don't have to listen to anything it says.
He fined me $50 for mumping, said Hackney. Fred Cullen, he practically goes on patrol with a shopping bag, and all I had was a free pint at the Bunch of Grapes, and I found out that posh Wally is suddenly flashing a lot of money lately. That's worth knowing. I remember going out on patrol with Fred Cullen when I started, and you could practically see him tucking his napkin under his chin whenever we walked past the cafe. Oh no, Sergeant Cullen wouldn't dream of seeing you pay. They used to lay the table when they saw him turn the corner.
Everyone does it,
said Strong on the Arm. Captain Carrot never did, said Nobby.
Captain Carrot was special.
But what am I supposed to do with this? Said Visit, waving the ink-speckled message. Mr. Vimes wants some information. Urgently, he says. Strong on the Arm took the paper and read it.
Well, this shouldn't be hard, he said. Old Wussy stayed in Kicklebury Street, was a janitor there for years, and he owes me a favour.
If we're going to send the clacks to Mr. Vimes, then we ought to tell him about the scone and songy, said Red Shoe. You know he left a message about that. I've done a report.
Why? He's hundreds of miles away.
I'd just feel happier if he knew, said Reg, 'cause it worries me.
What good will it do sending it to him then?
Because then it'll worry him, and I can stop worrying, said Reg.
Corporal Norbs! He listened at the door. I'll swear he does.
He listens at the door. I'll swear he does, said Strong on the Arm.
I'm off.
Coming, Captain, shouted Nobby. He pulled open the bottom drawer of his battered and stained desk and took out a packet of chocolate biscuits, some of which he arranged daintily on a plate.
Does me no good at all to see you acting like this, Strong on the Arm went on, winking at the other dwarves. You've got it in you to be a really bad copper, Nobby. Breaks my heart to see you throwing it all away to become a really bad waitress.
Ha, 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 said Nobby. Just you wait. That's all I'm saying. He raised his voice. Coming right now, Captain. There was a sharp smell of burnt paper in the captain's room when Nobby entered. Nothing cheers up the day like a good fire, I always say, he said, putting the tray on the desk. But Captain Cullen wasn't paying any attention. He'd removed the sugar bowl from the locked drawer of his desk and had laid the cubes out in rows.
Do you see anything wrong with these lumps, Corporal?
He said quietly. Well, they're a bit manky where you've been handling them every...
There's 37, Corporal.
Sorry about that, Captain.
Visit must have pinched them when he was in here. He must have used some fancy foreign trick. They can do that, you know. Climb ropes and disappear up the top of them. That sort of thing.
Did he have a rope? Said Nobby.
Are you making fun of me, Corporal?
Nobby saluted. No, sir. Maybe it was a invisible one, sir. After all, if they can disappear up a rope, they can make the rope disappear too, obviously.
Good thinking, Corporal.
On the subject of thinking, sir, said Nobby, plunging in, have you had time in your busy schedule to give some thought to the promotion of the new sergeant?
I have, as a matter of fact. Put that very thing in hand, Corporal.
Good, sir.
I've borne in mind everything you said, and the choice was staring me in the face.
Yes, sir, said Nobby, sticking out his chest and saluting.
I just hope it don't cause loss of morals. It can do that when people are promoted. So if there's any trouble like that, I want this sugar-stealing person reported to me right away. Understand?
Yes, sir. Nobby's feet had almost left the ground.
And I shall rely on you, Corporal, to let me know if Sergeant Flint has any trouble.
Sergeant Flint? Said Nobby in a little voice.
I know he's a troll, but I won't have it said I'm an unfair man.
Sergeant Flint.
I knows I can rely on you, Corporal.
Sergeant Flint.
That will be all. I've got to go and see his lordship in an hour, and I want some time to think. That's what my job is, thinking.
Sergeant Flint.
Yes, I should go and report to him if I was you.
White chicken feathers were scattered across the field. The farmer stood at the door of his henhouse, shaking his head. He glanced up as a horseman approached.
Good morrow, sir. Are you experiencing trouble?
The farmer opened his mouth for a witty or at least snappy response, but something stopped him. Perhaps it was the sword the horseman had slung across his back. Perhaps it was the man's faint smile. The smile was somehow more frightening. Something's been at my fowls, he ventured. Fox, I reckon.
Wolf,
I suspect, said the rider. The man opened his mouth to say, Don't be daft, we don't get wolves down here this time of the year. But again, the confident smile made him hesitate. Got many hens, did they? 6, said the farmer. And they got in by... Well, that's the strange thing. Here, keep that dog away. The small mongrel had leapt down from the saddle and was sniffing around the hen houses. He won't be any trouble, said the rider. Don't push your luck, mate. He's in a funny mood, said a voice behind the farmer. He turned around quickly. The dog looked up at him innocently. Everyone knew that dogs didn't talk. Woof, bark, whine, it said. He's highly trained, said the rider. Yeah, right, said the voice behind the farmer. He felt an overpowering desire to see the back of the horseman. The smile was getting on his nerves, and now he was hearing things. I can't see how they got in, he said. The door's latch. And wolves don't usually leave payment, right? Said the rider. How the hell did you know that? Well, several reasons, sir, but I couldn't help noticing that you clenched your fist tightly as soon as you heard me, and I surmise, therefore, that you found, let me see, $3 left in the chicken house. $3 would buy 6 fine birds and more pork. The man opened his fist wordlessly. The coins glinted in the sunlight. But I sells them at the gate for 10 pence, he wailed. They only had to ask. Probably didn't want to bother you, said the horseman. Since I am here, sir, I would be grateful if you could sell me a chicken. Behind the farmer, the dog said, Woof, woof. 2 chickens, and I will not trespass further upon your time. Woof, woof, woof. 3 chickens, said the rider warily, and if you have them dressed and cooked while I tend to my horse, I will gladly pay $1 each. Woof, woof. Without garlic or any seasoning on 2 of the chickens, please, said the rider. The farmer nodded wordlessly. $1 a chicken wasn't chicken feed. You didn't turn up your nose at an offer like that. But most importantly, you didn't disobey a man with that faint little smile on his face. It didn't seem to move or change. As smiles went, you wanted this one to go as far away as possible. He hurried off to the yard that held his best fowls, reached down to select the fattest, and paused. A man who was mad enough to pay $1 for a good chicken might be quite content with just a reasonable chicken. After all, he stood up. Only the best, mister. He spun around. There was no one except the little scruffy dog, which had followed him and was now raising a cloud of dust as it scratched itself. Woof, it said. He threw a stone at it and it trotted off. Then he selected 3 of the very best chickens. Carrot was lying down under a tree, trying to make his head comfortable on a saddlebag. Did you see where she'd almost rubbed out her footprints in the dust? Said Gaspard. Yes, said Carrot, closing his eyes. Does she always pay for chickens? Yes. Why? Carrot turned over. Because animals don't. Gaspard looked at the back of Carrot's head. On the whole, he enjoyed the unusual gift of speech, but something about the reddening of Carrot's ears told him that this was the time to employ the even rarer gift of silence. He settled down in the pose he almost unconsciously categorized as faithful companion keeping watch, got bored, scratched himself absent-mindedly, curled up in the pose known as faithful companion, curled up with his nose pressed on his bottom, footnote 12, and fell asleep. Footnote 12. One that no other creature in the world would ever adopt. End footnote 12. He settled down in the pose he almost unconsciously categorized as faithful companion keeping watch. Got bored, scratched himself absent-mindedly, curled up in the pose known as faithful companion, curled up with his nose pressed on his bottom, and fell asleep. He awoke shortly afterwards to the sound of voices. There was also a faint smell of roast chicken coming from the direction of the farmhouse. Gaspard rolled over and saw the farmer talking to another man on the cart. He listened for a moment and then sat up, locked in a metaphysical conundrum. Finally, he woke Carrot by licking his ear. What? You got to promise to collect the roast chicken first, all right? Said Gaspard urgently. What? Carrot sat up. Get the chickens, and then we gotta go, right? You gotta promise.
All right, I promise. What's happening? You ever heard of a town called Scantcolot? I think it's about 10 miles from here. One of Mr. Farmer's neighbors has just told him that they've caught a wolf there. Killed it? No. But the wolf hunters. These wolf hunters in these parts, see? 'Cause of the sheep up on the hills, and they have to train their dogs first. Remember, you promised about the chickens.
At precisely 11 o'clock, there was a smart rap on Lord Veterinary's door. The patrician gave the woodwork a puzzled frown. At last, he said, "Come." Fred Cullen entered with difficulty. Veterinary watched him for a few moments until pity overcame even him. "Acting Captain, it is not necessary to remain to attention at all times," he said kindly. "You are allowed to unbend enough for the satisfactory manipulation of a doorknob."
Yes, sir!
Lord Veterinary raised a hand to his ear protectively. "You may be seated.
Yes, sir!
You may be quieter too."
Yes, sir!
Lord Veterinary retreated to the protection of his desk. "May I commend you on the gleam of your armor, Acting Captain?"
Spit and polish, sir! No substitute for it, sir!
Sweat was streaming down Cullen's face. "Oh, good. Clearly you have been purchasing extra supplies of spit. Now then, let me see." Lord Veterinary drew a sheet of paper from one of the small stacks in front of him. "Now then, Acting..."
Sir!
"To be sure, I have here another complaint of over-enthusiastic clamping. I'm sure you know to what I refer."
It was causing serious traffic congestion, sir!
"Quite so. It is well known for it. But it is, in fact, the Opera House."
Sir!
"The owner feels that big yellow clamps at each corner detract from what I might call the tone of the building. And, of course, they do prevent him from driving it away."
Sir!
"Indeed, I think that this is a case where discretion might be advisable, Acting Captain."
Got to make an example to the others, sir!
"Ah, yes." The patrician held another piece of paper delicately between thumb and forefinger, as though it was some rare and strange creature. "The others being, let me see if I can recall, some things do stick in the mind, so... Ah, yes. 3 other buildings, 6 fountains, 3 statues, and the gibbet in none such street. Oh, and my own palace."
I fully understand you're parked on business, sir!
Lord Veterinary paused. He found it difficult to talk to Frederick Cullen. He dealt on a daily basis with people who treated conversation as a complex game, and with Cullen, he had to keep on adjusting his mind in case he overshot. "Pursuing the business of your recent career with, I have to admit, some considerable and growing fascination, I am moved to ask you why the watch now appears to have a staff of 20.
Sir?
You had around 60 a little while ago, I'm sure." Cullen mopped his face.
Cutting out the dead wood, sir! Making the watch leaner and fitter, sir!
"I see. The number of internal disciplinary charges you have laid against your men," and here The patrician picked up a much thicker document. Seems somewhat excessive. I see no fewer than 173 offences of eyeballing, earlobing, and nostriling, for example.
Sir!
Nostriling? Acting captain?
Sir!
Oh, and I see. Ah, yes. One charge of making his arm fall off in an insubordinate way, laid against Constable Shoe. Commander Vimes has always given me glowing reports about this officer.
He's a nasty piece of work, sir. You can't trust the dead ones.
Nor, it would seem, most of the live ones.
Sir!
Cullen leaned forward, his face twisted in a ghastly grimace of conspiratoriality.
Between you and me, sir, Commander Vimes was a good deal too soft on them. He let them get away with too much. No sugar is safe, sir.
Veterinary's eyes narrowed, but the telescopes on planet Cullen were far too unsophisticated to detect his mood. I certainly recall him mentioning a couple of officers whose timekeeping, demeanour, and all-round uselessness were a dreadful example to the rest of the men, said the patrician.
There's my point, said Cullen triumphantly. One bad apple ruins the whole barrel.
I think there's only a basket now, said the patrician. A punnet, possibly. Punnet. A small basket for fruits or vegetables. Punnet.
Don't you worry about a thing, your lordship. I'll turn things around. I'll soon get them smartened up.
I am sure you have it in you to surprise me even further, said Veterinary, leaning back. I shall definitely keep my eye on you as the man to watch. And now, Acting Captain, do you have anything else to report?
All nice and quiet, sir.
I would that it was, said Veterinary. I was just wondering if there was anything going on involving any person in this city called... He looked down at another sheet of paper. Sonky. Captain Cullen almost swallowed his tongue.
Minor matter, sir,
he managed. So, Sonky is alive?
Found dead, sir.
Murdered?
Sir.
Dear me. Many people would not consider that a minor matter, Acting Captain. Sonky, for one.
Well, sir, not everyone agrees with what he does, sir.
Are we by any chance talking about Wallace Sonky, the manufacturer of rubber goods?
Sir.
Boots and gloves seem non-controversial to me, Acting Captain.
It's, the other stuff, sir.
Cullen coughed nervously.
He makes them rubber wallies, sir.
Ah, the preventatives.
Lot of people don't agree with that sort of thing, sir.
So, I understand. Cullen drew himself up to attention again.
Not natural, in my view, sir. Not in favour of unnatural things.
Veterinary looked perplexed. You mean you eat your meat raw and sleep in a tree?
Sir?
Oh, nothing. Someone in Uberwald seems to be taking an interest in him lately. And now he's dead. I would not dream of telling the watch their job, of course. He watched Cullen carefully to see if this had sunk in. I said that it is entirely up to you to choose what to investigate in this bustling city, he prompted. Cullen was lost in unfamiliar country without a map.
Thank you, sir,
he barked. Veterinary sighed. And now, acting captain, I'm sure there's much that needs your attention.
Sir, I've got plans to...
I meant, do not let me detain you.
Oh, that's all right, sir. I've got plenty of time.
Goodbye, acting Captain Cullen. Out in the anteroom, Fred Cullen stood very still for a while, until his heartbeat wound down from a whine to at least a purr. It had, on the whole, gone quite well. Very well. Amazingly well, really. His lordship had practically taken him into his confidence. He'd called him a man to watch. Fred wondered why he'd been so scared of officering all these years. There was nothing to it, really, once you got the bull between your teeth. If only he'd started years ago. Of course, he wouldn't hear a word said about Mr. Vimes, who should certainly be looking after himself in those dangerous foreign parts. But, well, Fred Cullen had been a sergeant when Sam Vimes was a rookie, hadn't he? It was only his natural deference that had held him back all these years. When Sam Vimes came back, and with the patrician there to put in a good word for him, Fred Cullen would definitely be on the promotion ladder. Only to full captain, of course. He thought as he strutted down the stairs with great care, because strutting is usually impossible while walking downwards. He wouldn't want to outrank Captain Carrot. That would be wrong. This fact shows that, however crazed with power someone may be, a tiny instinct for self-preservation always remains.